We're on. Okay. So,
Hello.
hello, Lee. So, we just did 10 minutes of recording on Riverside and it completely glitched. So, we decided to hop over to Zoom because it's a bit more easy with the tech. So, that
Mm,
leads right into what a big thing I wanted to talk about today and something that I've been working through. It's been
mm,
sort of a yoga, you could say, a practice is how to navigate all of these different technologies, all of these different things we have to do as creators. Like you have Telegram messages, you have emails, you have Twitter DMs, you have to do replies, you're in engagement groups, you have to update your landing page, you have to figure out how to build a website. Like it's so much, it can often feel overwhelming. So, how do
yeah.
you navigate this from a place of calm and a place of flow?
Yeah, I think this is something that everybody struggles with, myself included at times. And I think primarily, the most important thing that you can do to sort of move the needle on this is to understand the role of the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And there's a fantastic quote. Um, the ease and perfection that you experience depends entirely on the extent to which you cease to rely on the conscious mind. This is from the Master Key System by Charles F. Hannell, and I immediately recognized this to be completely true. And we've all tasted this, we've all experienced flow. When you're in a state of flow, there is no sort of self-referential thoughts for one, which leads us on to a different point later. But there's no attempting to control or micromanage or edit every last little detail. You're just flowing. You're channeling source. You could put it that way if you like, channeling God, unlocking your depths of your creativity, however you would like to frame it. We know that it's incredibly powerful, and so I think setting some boundaries. Saying right today I'm going to do 2 hours of engagement or posting, or whatever it may be, and really kind of mapping all that out that's very important. But understanding that the conscious mind only has three main roles, so that when we do go and use all these technologies and digital platforms, we're not burning ourselves out just by default. So first role of the conscious mind is discrimination, or aka choosing a high leverage task to do. Okay, today I have 2 hours where I'm going to spend on the computer. How am I going to spend that 2 hours? What's the highest leverage thing that I can do? What is most aligned with my higher self, with the man I want to be in the future? Okay, well, it's writing my landing page because that's going to get me clients. That's going to allow me to serve more people. Excellent. All right. The second role is to guard the gates of the subconscious mind. Oh, you're not good enough. You can't do it. You don't deserve this. No. We recognize when those thoughts are present and we just simply release them. I like to do like a 3R system for these kinds of, that's what I teach my clients is you recognize when there's sort of some debugging to be done, aka thoughts which are based on redundant belief systems. So you recognize that they're there, you relax, and you return to whatever you're doing. This also has the implications of not only guarding the subconscious mind from your own neuroses, but also the neuroses of society and of family and of friends and people who will try and put you in a little tiny box and they're very comfortable with you remaining there. So guarding the gates of the subconscious mind, second task, aka essentially mindfulness, or one of the aspects of mindfulness. And third, it's imprinting your will on the subconscious mind. What do you desire? What do you wish to bring out into the external and manifest? So those are the three roles. And if you're not using the conscious mind for one of those three roles, then relax and slip into a state of flow and allow the infinite intelligence of the subconscious mind to do its thing. And there's a very simple way of doing this, which is set an intention. Right, I want to write a brilliant landing page, which is going to allow me to serve more people. Let's say, this intention should be aligned with your higher self, and there should be an energetic component there. Imagine serving. Imagine how good that feels to see these people having these amazing transformations. Then relax. Allow all the illusion of control to slip away. Anchor the conscious mind onto the breath and just start channeling. Allow source to flow through you. And I find that that is an incredibly nourishing way to operate and to do the work that needs to be done, but in a sort of an effortless manner. And let me just see if I can pull up this quote from the Tao Te Ching.
I love it.
That Yeah, the Tao Te Ching is such a okay. So it's practice, not doing. When action is pure and selfless, everything settles into its own perfect place. And so, I prefer, Jack, these meta answers. So although this is not super in depth about the individual steps to take, I prefer what's the big step I can take, which affects everything else. And that's really my, I guess, not intentionally, but that's become a personal philosophy that what are the kind of the big, real lever moving actions that I can take that then affect all the other smaller actions. And that alone as well, by the way, having that kind of mindset really, it reduces a lot of the anxiety and stress and the tendency to over rely on the conscious mind. So let me shoot the question back to you, because I think you're really prolific. Like right now you're making like a 12-part course, I believe. I saw some teaser of it on Twitter and it looked incredibly well done. So how do you navigate that? Because yeah, I'm super curious.
Yeah, so I think it starts in mine. My tips are probably a bit more tactical, but they do
Mm,
derive from this sense of staying in line with the higher self. So for me, it's
mm,
like I know if I can set those boundaries and stay with my routines, I can wake up and execute pretty well. So what does
right.
that look like? It's like 8 o'clock at night. I have an alarm
Mm,
going off that's telling me to brain dump journal, meditate, and read
mm,
some spirituality or philosophy book before I go to bed,
mm,
because that keeps me in that higher state and I wake up with intentions. Something else I've done recently that's been pretty beneficial. I've actually slipped away from it a bit. This is a reminder to get back to it, but
mm.
priming the subconscious with the question before sleep. I was doing
Very good.
that for a couple weeks and it was
Mm.
insane. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night, like straight up in bed and just have like completely new insights and downloads
Yeah.
about where I should go and how I'm going to get there. So for me, it starts at night and then I wake up in the morning and it's just purely execution. So
Mm.
I'll basically drive to the coffee shop or walk to the coffee shop, depending on weather, whatever, depending on how far it is. And I'll prime myself again. I usually play like a Naval podcast. Like I'll play his podcast, How to Get Rich. And that's just a great reminder of the business principles I want to live by. And that just gives me a little boost of motivation. And then once I get there, it's like from 5:15, 5:30 till 10:30. Like I'm pretty much focused and in flow. Now, the one thing that I'm still trying to figure out is I'll do that until about 10:30 in the morning. And then I'll go to the gym, I'll go do yoga, I'll go lift, I'll go run, etc. I'll hit sauna, and then I'll come back and eat. And then
Mm.
sometimes in the afternoon, while all these really lever moving tasks are done, it's like there's still a lot more to be done, right? It's
Mm.
the messages, it's the networking, it's the cleaning up emails, it's like the little menial task. It's like, oh, you have to call the credit card company or like these little things. And that's often where I find myself finding so much resistance. Like sitting down to do 4 hours of writing or building, like with no notifications, phone is on airplane mode. That's like that's peak flow state for me. I love that. But in the afternoon, when it's like, oh, you have 180 Telegram messages and like you have to like hit these engagement groups, it's like sometimes I just want to lay down in my bed and not even look at it. So
Right.
I'm curious how you navigate those waters of all those little pesky things that add up and just can cause this overwhelm.
Well, I think first of all, that's really beautiful because we had like the sort of big picture, and then the more tactical approach.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's beautiful, and I really like your approach. And yeah, it's awesome. Those pesky things, they put us in a situation where all of a sudden it's not my time anymore. Now I'm doing pesky things. Now I'm doing things which are not very enjoyable, to say the least. But I think one big thing that can be really powerful is a mental reframe. All time is my time.
Mm-hmm.
All opportunities are meditation, are practice. Every single receipt that I sign off is another step. And I often say this to my clients. It's like every time that you complete, where's my finger gone? Every time that you complete a positive lever moving action like this, or even a small menial action, it's like laying a brick in the inner shrine in your heart, a place that you can return to and find the peace, the simplicity, the serenity that is actually your nature to some extent. So this too, even doing all the little menial things, this too is practice. All time is your time. There's no separation between flow time, yoga time, fun time. menial task time, and finally now it's your time. Oh, finally, now right at the end of the day, you get some jack time. Well, how about we just change that? All time is jack time. Life is the practice. It's not just when we get a moment to sit on the cushion. It's as we engage with the world and some of the boring tasks. Look, brother, I've done an international move from Japan to Malaysia. I've gotten married and done all the paperwork and visa stuff that we've had to do, and then have since moved into a new pad here in Kuala Lumpur. The amount of menial shiza that I've had to do in this time has been huge, along with also, running my business, which has been abundant in the best way. So I know what you're coming from, and it's just like, okay, this is really dull and boring, perhaps. Naturally, that's my natural inclination. Now let's make it practice. Let's just flip the switch. It's now practice. Me doing this boring stuff is now the highest test of my practice. It's just another step forward on the path. It's another brick in the inner shrine. Yeah. So that's kind of how I view these things. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Did that sort of resonate, or?
No, it does. It really does. And it's always a great reminder, because I read these things and I hear these things and I listen to these spiritual teachers, and they provide such good reminders. And like 3 things come to mind right away. Ram Dass, when he talks about doing the dishes, he's like, that's your yoga. Like everything is your yoga. Talking to people is your yoga. All of these are practices to stay in that state. I was also listening to a Michael Singer podcast the other day, and it was called The Commitment to Stay Conscious. I really recommend that series, his podcast series. It's tremendous stuff. And he has a quote that I actually just pulled up. He says, to really grow, you have to decide that's what your life is about. Nothing else matters. And maintaining that consciousness, even in those moments where your mind is like, oh, I don't want to do this. This is such a burden. It's like, no, this is an opportunity to practice, right? And another quote that comes to mind is from Naval, where he's like, you can be meditating 24/7. You can be meditating when you work. You can be meditating when you're actually meditating. You can be meditating when you're walking down the street. So that's such a good reminder. Now, it's easier said in theory than in practice, but I think it's one of those things that you catch yourself, right? You catch yourself when your mind is going crazy, or when you're dreading something, stepping back, gaining awareness. So for you now, because you're much farther along on this journey than I, like when these thoughts come up, like when you have to clean up emails, or you have to like adjust this little thing on your website, like what is your process for navigating that without attaching to the mind, I guess?
Well, yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I try just, if there's an element of just do it, just do it. And I think for me, at least, one thing that you can, a way to kind of alchemically transmute the mundane into the mystical, or the beautiful, just into practice, is just to slow yourself down a little bit, bring the energy down and into the body, anchor it in the gut, in the lower belly with the breath, and just really engage with whatever is in front of you, and recognize that. And this mindset works for some people, it doesn't work for others. It somewhat depends on your inclinations. Recognize that everything is sacred. Every turn of the page, every click of the mouse, every thing that you type, try and recognize the sacredness of it all. It's all, again, this mindset works for some people, not for others. It's all God's love, or you could say it's all practice. And just that act of slowing down and really engaging with what you're doing, it just makes it's like, oh, wow, I can enter into a flow state when I'm doing whatever, not only when I'm doing enjoyable tasks. And that is a faculty to train. It's not something that you can instantly tap into, something you have to train. But I do completely, by the way, I always thought that guy's name was Naval, which would be a rather sort of unfortunate name. And now he's saying Naval, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
It sounds much more profound that way. Naval.
Yeah. Naval. Yeah. No. Okay, good. Well, thank you for illuminating that. I think as well, yeah, he's right. Really, this is the practice of mindfulness. It's just about slowing down. That your meditation doesn't finish as you get off the cushion. It's just that your object of meditation moves away from being the breath or a feeling of loving kindness, or just doing nothing. And it becomes life itself, this very moment. And that is so difficult to really engage with, because we've a lot of the time we've made an unconscious bargain with ourselves that it's out there. The relaxation, the moment where we allow ourselves to enjoy life, it's at some arbitrary point in the future, after 8 p.m., when I can finally sit down and do what I want to do. That is a really good way to exhaust your energies, create a lot of resistance and tension in the body and mind, and basically the burnout, over time. That's burnout. So yeah, I think just engaging with the moment as it is, engaging with whatever you're doing, no matter how mundane it would appear to be, that's just a thought, ultimately. It's just a vibration. It can't hurt you. And that goes for all thoughts. They're just thoughts. They're just vibrations. They cannot hurt you. The only reality that they have in this very moment is the reality which you choose to give them. This is hugely liberating to realize. So I'm realizing that I could ramble on now and sort of start talking about awakenings of the head and heart. And yeah, but it's a tricky business. And it seems that you navigate it, Jack, with not, I won't say an ease necessarily, but it seems that you navigate it skillfully. So what for you has been like a very high leverage thing in order to kind of be as prolific as you are? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that, because sometimes, I'm not thinking it myself. But even as you were talking there, the slowing down, the connecting with the present moment, every moment is sacred. As you were talking, I was like feeling my feet on the floor. I was like feeling my breath in this moment. I was like thinking, we're communicating across the entire world. Like, it's morning for you, it's night for me, and we're on this podcast. Like, it's a pretty incredible experience, right? When you really think about it like that. So just like finding the beauty in the mundane, like, and even this is not very mundane, but I really love that point. And something else, this kind of ties into your question, how do I navigate it? So one, to give you another compliment, like, I love connecting with you and seeing your content on Twitter, because every time it stops my scroll, like sometimes I could be mindlessly scrolling. It's like, oh, like 10 weight loss trips, 10 Google Chrome extensions. It's like, all right, what am I doing? And then I
Yeah.
see Leigh Zentrepreneur, and it's like, stop, embrace the moment, slow down. And it's like, I need that reminder, right? We all need that reminder. And
Yeah.
so I really appreciate your content, and I appreciate when we communicate via voice notes or Zooms. It's super helpful. But yeah, how do I stay prolific with it? I think it's realizing that spirituality and consciousness is the meta game. I wrote about this in my newsletter, actually, that I sent out today. And there's a book that was really life-changing for me called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhiani. He's the CEO of a really big meditation company and mindfulness company called Mind Valley. And that book completely changed my life, because I was at a very low point. I had just torn my ACL, failed the startup, didn't know where I was going to go. And I was sitting in my room with a torn ACL, couldn't move. And it was on my roommate's desk, and I happened to pick it up. I hadn't read in years. Like, I was the jock. I didn't really read. And that completely blew my mind with like, you can create your reality. And I never realized that until that moment. I had like kind of subconsciously known, but that really put it into light. And so, point is, in that book, he has a section in the book where he has 12 different areas of your life to rank on a scale of 1 through 10. So it's like health, relationships, finances, business, happiness, spirituality, etc. There's 10 of them. I can't name them all. But I was rereading that book this week just to glance at it, because I was like, it'd be cool for me to revisit this because it was so profound for me 2 years ago. And I went through that exercise again without looking at my previous year's results, and I re-ranked them. And I then compared the answers, and I was significantly higher across the board now versus where I was 2 years ago. But the biggest change was 2 years ago, I ranked spirituality as a 2 out of 10. I had no idea even what it meant. I was at that point a pretty staunch agnostic or atheist, or I just didn't really think about it. I was raised Lutheran, and then I started learning about evolution and science in school, and I just brushed it off. I thought it was woo-woo bullshit, right? And come full circle now, 2 years later, I re-ranked it, and I ranked it as a 9. And I
Wow.
think that is the biggest
Mm.
change that has that's one step upstream of all the other things that have also raised. Like, I think my health is in better shape right now because my spiritual growth has upped. I think my business is in better shape, or where I'm going with business or going with my life is in much better hands because of my spiritual growth. So it's like consciousness and spirituality, I really think, is the meta game. Um,
Yeah,
so I don't know. Does that answer your question about the proficiency?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the prolificlessness. How do you say that word?
I don't know.
I'm
I
not sure.
couldn't think of it.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I could see that, and I was like, wait, how do you say that? Yeah, I think it certainly does, and ultimately, this is the highest leverage thing that you can do, and we don't even need to use the word spirituality because that has all kinds of baggage and connotations
Mm,
that can be off-putting to more perhaps agnostic or more sort of practical people.
yeah.
But just learning how to relax, learning how to focus deeply in an effortless manner, learning how to slip into flow, learning how to be present. These are the qualities that make you the very best version of yourself, be that as a leader, be that as an entrepreneur, a father, a husband, whatever realm of human endeavor you are pursuing. You are your best when you are centered, calm, and just able to see things without all the lenses of perception kind of muddying objective reality. So these are the greatest lever moving things that you can possibly do, is learning how to be calm, learning how to be present, learning how to recognize tension in the body and alchemically transmute that into just relaxation. And just kind of going back to the previous point, for anybody listening to this, a powerful framework that you can implement just to really start engaging with the moment is, first of all, just come back into the room. Take a few mindful breaths and really feel the energy coming down and into the body. And just come back into the room. And just have a look around. Like, so right now I've got a chest of drawers here, I've got a wardrobe here, a mouse. I've even got a little praying gorilla that I won in a Japanese capsule thing. The point being, just come into the room and re-engage with what is, and just drop all the concepts, drop all the labels, and just have a look around. And you might find that just softening your gaze here, so instead of being like this, just softening the gaze just instantly opens things up a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, this is all quite refreshing when we look at it without labeling and adding concepts. And just taking a few mindful breaths. And now from here, just slowing down 20% and having a 4-point smile, an energetic smile in the heart center, a physical smile in the mouth, a physical/energetic smile in the eyes, and a smile in the mind. 4-point smile. Slow down. Treat everything as sacred and do one thing at one time with all of your being. I had a guy the other day on a call, a client, he's an ex-NCAA D1 athlete. I actually have quite a number of clients like that, oddly. It's a strange coincidence. High performers, very critical, very hard on themselves typically. And he said, well, yeah, that sounds great, Leigh, but I just don't think I can slip into a flow state while I'm doing X, Y, Z. And although this is a really crude example, it does highlight the power of this. I slipped into a really profound flow state the other week while taking a shit. And that's a very crude example, but I was like, wow, every tear of the paper was precise and beautiful. And it just goes to show that if you can get into a flow state while wiping your ass and taking a shit, you can get into a flow state while doing just about anything. Because that's as mundane and as basic as it gets. It doesn't get any more base than that. So yeah, you can get into a flow state while writing a diary, while doing deep work in Starbucks, or while doing whatever. So yeah.
That just threw me for a crazy loop. I don't even know where to take that, but I absolutely love it. I absolutely love
Yeah.
it. And like, the belief that you can't get into a flow state during XYZ, it's just a belief, like, right? Like,
Right. Mm.
there's a quote, I think Dan Coe tweeted it at one point. He said, "Your
Mm.
potential is as high as your mind is open." And like,
Mm.
I loved that because it's like when you are able to identify whenever a limiting belief comes up, you can just
Mm.
instantly see it for what it is and then break through it. But I think the most
Yeah.
dangerous limiting beliefs are the ones we don't even know we hold. So,
Right. Mm.
how can you become aware of those beliefs that are holding you back, but you aren't consciously aware that they are?
Right. And yeah, actually, rather easily. Oh, rather, I should say simply. It's not necessarily easy, but the foundation of all inner work and of all peak performance and of all, let's say, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, inner work is awareness. You have to cultivate awareness. This is a skill. This is a faculty that you develop. It's like passive. It's both active and passive. Without awareness, and we can call this metacognition, aka the ability to be able to notice and recognize what is going on in the mind and body system. What thoughts are arising? What lens of perspective am I seeing through? What energetic emotion is present in the body, and what's going on, sort of just in terms of tension in the body? How can I be aware of this? Because once we're aware of things, we can start to either let them go or perhaps investigate them if they are chronically arising. Let's say there's a sense of anxiety that constantly arises in a particular situation, and you have no idea why. It's just you've taken it just to be that's how it is. Well, I mean, that's predicated on some kind of belief somewhere. And without that awareness to actually recognize, oh, yeah, this happens every time I walk through the door of Starbucks. I'm aware of it now. And now I can start to investigate it with this mind, which has been sharpened, this sharpened axe, as it were. So that when you come to cut away at whatever is binding you, you can just slice right through. If your axe is dull, or your mind, your focus is dull, you're going to be, I mean, you're not even going to know that there's something binding you anyway. So, okay, how do we do this? Primarily, you do this through meditation, where you are sitting, and it's like your mind is a pool of water, constantly swirling and moving. All the dust is kicked up from the bottom. You can't see a damn thing, apart from the very surface level. Or in this case, it'd be the most obvious of thoughts and states. But as we sit in meditation, we allow the mind just to still. The activity slows. Now, and don't get me wrong, if you are listening to this and you've tried meditation and you've become aware of the chaos of the mind, yeah, that's fine. But you retrain the mind through meditation. My mind is wandering, I recognize, I relax, I come back. Again and again and again and again, until the mind sort of stays here for a while. And when it moves, you can start to recognize it. So it might be in the beginning, it might be like, oh, the cat pissed on the carpet. Oh, I've got to go and do this, blah, 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 blah. You come back, relax, come back. And eventually the mind sort of just rests here more and more. What's it? I need to. No. And so the pool of water just stills. And now we can start to see what's at the bottom of the pool, and it naturally starts to come up, and we can, in that awareness, in a compassionate awareness, not pushing anything away, we can just see what comes up, what tension and tightness is there, and just holding it in a compassionate, respectful awareness, not pushing it away. If you try and push it away, it just comes back, it gets stronger. If you ignore it, it just starts growing in the background. Hold it in a compassionate awareness. Let's say there's a feeling of persistent anxiety. When it's there, let's hold it in a compassionate, respectful awareness and just allow it to start to loosen up. And eventually it will just liberate itself and fall away. And it might even give you an insight as to why it's there. So meditation, still the pool of the mind. Then continue your meditation throughout the day by practicing mindfulness, slowing down. Once you've cultivated this awareness, that's when you can really start to recognize the enemy, as it were. Enemy is a bit of a dramatic word here, but we can understand, oh, yeah, these thoughts, feelings, and perspectives arise in certain situations. and now I can start relaxing out of them. And all of those perspectives, thoughts, kind of habitual stuff, they've all got like a set amount of fuel. So each time you relax out of them, you recognize, relax, and return to the present moment. It burns a bit of fuel until eventually there's no fuel. And sometimes it will show you why it's there. And you might get some sort of memory from childhood, or some sort of traumatic event, or just perhaps a certain perspective that occurred recently. Or it just kind of stops coming. It's run out of fuel. You're like, oh, my mind's rather still right now. It's rather calm. So, yeah, that cultivating awareness through meditation and mindfulness, essentially, and just really engaging with the present moment. Very long-winded, brother. I apologize.
No. Don't
Yeah.
apologize. I love the long-winded answer. I think you need the fluff. You need all the philosophy and all the explanation to really understand it. So what I'm curious about now, and just this is something that I've personally been neglecting a bit, and I know like meditation is one of those things that a lot of people say they do, but like how many people really do it and sit down and practice every day? And I can say, since I've been home now for a couple weeks, and I've really been in this grind mode of like the focus is business. Like I've probably neglected it half of the days, right? Like I set an intention to do it, but I'm like, I don't really feel like it. So why should somebody like me make it a non-negotiable to sit every day?
I mean, how do you feel when you sit versus when you don't sit?
Yeah, I can definitely navigate those chaotic moments throughout the day with more patience and more awareness. So I guess that's the answer. Yeah.
And does that help you move towards your goals in a way that's sustainable?
Definitely.
There you go. That's it.
So how do you work it into your day? Like, is it first thing? Is it priority? Is it end of day? Is it middle of day? Where do you structure it in?
I think in the beginning of the day is very good, and I think it can start from the very moment you wake up, and you're, oh my god, I've got to start doing stuff as soon as I wake up. Well, look, you're thinking anyway, right? And it's probably unconscious. Oh shit, I've got this to do. I've got X, Y, Z. So start from the very moment you wake up by just making your very first thought, or as soon as you possibly can, awareness of the breath. So you wake up, you instantly become aware of the breath. I personally find a prayer of gratitude to be very powerful here. And, gratitude has very powerful effects on everything from the brain to the energetic system. So I usually say something like, thank you for this life, starting big. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this very moment. Not just saying the words, feeling. And then from there, getting up, maybe, go to the toilet, doing what you need to do. And then immediately going to sit 30 to 90 minutes, depending on the day. And I'm not saying everyone has to do this, but yeah, I would say that starting the day with this kind of collected, calm mind is the foundation on which all sustainable progress is formed. So that's how I would go about it. And I'm trying to be very intentional with the length of my answers here, so because I don't want to ramble too much. But I mean, okay, for you, Jack, on a day where, how do you implement it? When you wake up, kind of what are you doing? I'm curious.
So I've tried a little system over the past week or so, which has been kind of cool. But over the past couple of days, it's been more, I'm just falling back asleep. So here's what I'm doing. I've been setting 3 alarms. So the first alarm goes off and I hit snooze, and then I try to do the meditation in my bed, right? As I'm like waking up for say 10 minutes. And then another alarm goes off and I practice the gratitude for 5 minutes. And then the third alarm goes off, and then it's time to wake up. So that's been how I've been trying to incorporate it in. But I notice in myself that desire to essentially wake up and get to it, wake up and get to the work. I'm excited to do the work. And I think that's a good thing. I think it means I'm working on the right thing. But so I'm just thinking I need to experiment and play around with it, but maybe carving out more time in the morning for that, or sticking to a midday session, or maybe even at night. And at night, I've been a bit more consistent with it. After I journal, I'll sit for 15 to 20 minutes, but sometimes I want to read. So it's like I'm not so quite disciplined and consistent with it as potentially I should be. Although there have been times when I've been not in such a building phase in a building season where
Mm.
I find it much easier to carve out that time.
Right.
So I think it comes back down to discipline. It's really an active discipline.
Well, maybe an act of discipline or simply a matter of perspective. I'm in building season. I am going to be very busy right now, and I'm going to be doing a lot of activity. Actually, this is when I need this the most, not the
Mm,
least.
mm,
You know, just like an athlete who's training, let's say he's a fighter in training camp. He also needs more than ever. He needs that active, or not active, but he needs rest and recovery time. Because if you get injured halfway through a training camp and you don't make it to the fight, let's say, I'm a big MMA UFC fan, so this is kind of the analogy I'm using, and I know you're an athlete. So if you don't make it to the fight, well, you're fucked. You don't get your money, you don't get to perform, you don't get to show what you've been working on. So it's a recognition that there's two times where you really need meditation the most, which is when you are the busiest. And there's an old expression: meditate for 30 minutes a day, unless you're too busy. Then do it for an hour. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with that one.
yeah.
So it's when you're super busy, it's when you need it the most, but also when you're making really good progress. And you're like, well, I feel present, I feel light, I feel bright, I'm illuminated, I'm great. I don't need that anymore. I don't need to practice. No. You take your foot off the gas, and then you're back to this pendulum swing between good and bad, up and down. That's when you double down. That's when you put your foot on the gas and be like, no, I'm going to actually do another sit. And I'm just going to carve out the time for it and just do it. And I think it's the recognition as well that just makes you feel good, just makes the whole process sustainable.
So
yeah.
I think a lot of money Twitter people, and I
Mm.
guess we're technically in money Twitter, even though maybe it's a bit of a different frame. A lot of us entrepreneurs look up to a guy like Alex
Mm.
Hormozy, and I look up to him for some things, but other things I'm not aligned. And like, he's of the opinion that all this stuff is BS, that all that needs to be done is the work. So I'm
Mm.
curious if you encounter entrepreneurs in your work who are coming into your program with that mindset, and
Mm-hmm.
if they would actually, like, would Alex Hormozy maybe benefit from a 30-minute meditation session?
I think obviously Alex Hormozy is a very unique character. I honestly don't know a lot about him. Like, I don't really consider myself a money Twitter guy. I mean, I say that, but Twitter has allowed me to kind of, compared to my previous salary in Japan, I make anywhere between 3 to 5 times that a month generally. So Twitter's working out wonderfully well in that regard, and it's allowed me to serve people, which is primarily what I'm interested in. The money is an afterthought. I don't give a shit about the money, honestly. It very rarely comes into mind. I actually just want to serve. So I'm really not dialed into the whole Hormozy meta, as it were. Could he benefit from it? I mean, if you look at the science, certainly. But would it disrupt his flow? Look, everybody's individual at the end of the day. Everybody's got their unique way of going about things. And perhaps for him, his work is his meditation.
Mm.
I'm sure if you dug into it a bit, I'm not sure, but I'm sure he has some kind of practice to sort of center himself, to bring him back. But, there's a certain point in our lives where building is the primary focus. And maybe that's kind of what you're going through right now, right? Yeah, it's interesting. But some people are wired for it. And if you're interested in this, and we know that you're interested in spirituality and things like the Tao Te Ching and the Master Key system resonate, then yeah, you probably benefit from it. Because, I'm certainly not Alex Hormozy, and neither are you. And that's actually a good thing, because you're Jack Moses, and that's a beautiful place to be, regardless of what you do in the external. Being Jack Moses is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So, yeah, that's my perspective.
That's a great frame. And that is something that I've become more conscious of over the past couple weeks, especially when I got into this game. And I'm sure a lot of people resonate and feel this way. you put people on a pedestal. You look up
Mm,
to them as like they are above me, they are better than me, they are smarter than me. But what I've really come to notice over the past couple weeks, now that I'm connecting with these higher level players that I used to
mm,
put on this pedestal, that they're just humans. Like we're all just on our own inner journeys, right? Like we're
mm,
all just living our own lives, and coming
right.
to accept where you are in this moment is exactly where you're supposed to be. And I've really resonated with that recently. However, on the
Mm,
other hand, there's a lot of people out there who are depressed, who are extremely anxious, who are not in a good place right now. So what's the border there of like everything is unfolding as it is supposed to be, or my life is not where it's supposed to be and I need to get myself out of this rut? What is your perspective on there?
it is, you have to embrace paradox. Let me just quickly find.
Mm,
So there is and again, I refer to the Tao Te Ching because it's one of my favorite texts. So the sage lives openly with apparent duality and paradoxical unity. The sage can act without effort and teach without words, nurturing things without possessing them. He works, but not for rewards. He competes, but not for results. When the work is done, it is forgotten. That is why it lasts forever. So there's a paradox here where this is how this is actually something I teach my clients. It's like, paradoxically, you need to recognize that you're already whole, complete, lovable, and worthy of love. Now, that's going to make some people go, oh, hang on a minute. That's a bit uncomfortable. But, this is one of the original sins, one of the original self-limiting beliefs from which all the other self-limiting beliefs and the subsequent depressions and anxieties and neuroses seem to spring out of, is this: somewhere along the line, some part of you believe that they are not lovable. And that wound from the past seeps out into the present and colors certain perspectives, and it colors certain thoughts and reactions. And it prevents you from being the person who you need to be in the future. And so it's vital to operate from a place of, I am already whole, complete, lovable. I'm already powerful. I've got everything that I need. Whilst paradoxically recognizing that on the level of the relative flesh and blood, at the same time, there's an awful lot of work that can be done, a lot of improvement that can occur. And just holding that paradox is very powerful. And I really, one thing that I've come to understand is that the amount of conflicting or paradoxical beliefs that you can hold at one time, recognizing the validity of all of them while remaining attached to none, is kind of the degree. To me, that's a sign of intelligence. It's when we get fixated on a single belief system, that's when things tend to go wrong. And to be honest, brother, I've kind of forgotten the original question, but does that answer it? I'm kidding.
I think so. Yeah. No, I like
Mm,
the answer of paradoxes. And
mm,
something I've come to is like all the greatest truths in life are paradoxes. I think I put out this
mm,
tweet a long time ago when I was stumbling across this.
mm,
A sign of intelligence is being able to hold two conflicting ideas in your head, see the
mm.
point in both of them, and not attach with either. Um,
There you go. You've been mind raiding me. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's that probably stemmed from a guy on YouTube named
Mm.
actualize.org. Have you ever gotten into his stuff, Leo?
I just recently watched him. Just recently, because I heard all kinds of yeah. To me, he's not it.
Mm,
I respect him for doing his thing. That's not somebody I would take advice from personally.
interesting.
There's a
Can
whole
you
load of
elaborate on
controversy
why?
around. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's tons of controversy around him. And basically, if you're going to be a spiritual teacher, I don't consider myself a spiritual teacher, by the way. Some people say, "Oh, you teach spiritual." No, I don't really like the tag. But he does. He's a spiritual teacher. Specifically, he's teaching about enlightenment and awakening. Right?
Mhm.
So I believe that when you're teaching this kind of stuff, it's incredibly tender and it must be approached with utmost respect and humility, and it has to come from a place of knowingness. And when I watch him, I don't get that he's got it. And so
Mm.
to me, that's not it. And, you know, there's a lot of obsession with phenomena on his end and sexual stuff. And to me, that's just, it doesn't resonate, which is fine. And I'm not judging him. It's just, that's not for me. But I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's tons of nuggets of wisdom in his content. And I mean, are you a fan of his? And have I just shat on your
No. Well,
preference?
a lot of his stuff has been powerful for me. And this is what I
Mm,
think it comes back to the paradox. It's a sign of intelligence is being able to take ideas from somebody, but not attach to them
yeah.
ideologically as a fan or not a fan. I have heard some
Mm,
controversy about him. I haven't looked into it, but a couple videos, especially more so just his elaboration on topics that are really high level, like
mm,
ego development and developmental psychology and spiral dynamics. And these are things I never learned about in school. And
mm,
they showed me, like, just watching the 9 stages of ego development, it completely reframed how I saw the world because it helped me understand like why some people act the way they do, right? And that there are higher levels to aspire towards in your actualization journey.
mm.
And that consciousness, there are levels to it. And maybe this will tie in well to something we were talking about on our Riverside podcast before, but right before we got cut off. So
Yeah.
after my ayahuasca ceremony, I sent you a voice
Mm,
note with a lot of the downloads I had and the revelations around where I think my potential could lie and things I could build and what I want to do with my life. And you
mm,
said something that was super profound. And you said, if you can raise your consciousness, you become inevitable. If you can get your consciousness up to a level of, say, 500 on the Hawkins scale, everything else will flow from there. So maybe this would be a good jumping off point into this idea about like raising one's consciousness. So
mm.
I'm just starting Hawkins' work, like literally as of 2 nights ago. I started
Awesome.
reading Power versus Force, and I'm understanding the maps of consciousness, a very,
Mm,
very entry level. So maybe you could elaborate a bit more on like this scale of consciousness
mm.
and why is it so important as like this meta to then build your entire life upon.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, your ayahuasca experience sounded incredible. And I mean, I really thank you for sharing that with me. But yeah, the Hawking scale of consciousness, again, it's just a tool. I'm actually
Right.
not that familiar with Hawkins's work. I primarily know it through Matthew Latinus, who I'm sure you're familiar with on Twitter, who's one of the
I'm
very
not.
best accounts. Oh, you're not? Well, brother,
No.
we need to hook you up. No, but he's become a very, very dear friend, and he's one of the major proponents of Dr. Hawkins's work on Twitter. But we have both been discussing as of late that past the 600 level, where things start to go beyond concepts and it gets non-dual, that's where it sort of breaks down, and yeah, it loses a lot of its sort of value. But below that, which is where realistically most people are kind of operating, and that's not a judgment. That's just kind of how it is. And I think most people would readily admit that if they kind of read the descriptions. That's where it can be really useful. And so getting up to a level of 500, this comes back to what I was saying earlier. This is a place where, because I believe you kind of have to work with the ego before you transcend it. You have to shape the mind into something beautiful, honed and shining before it can kind of see through itself. The first awakening usually occurs at the level of mind. It's like, oh, all these thoughts which have been tormenting me are based on a belief that I am a separate individual entity. And the mind is opened to a point where I can't reliably say that that's true. And all the thoughts which have been tormenting me are just vibrations and inherently not self. They're kind of, they come, they go, they arise and they pass away. Where do they arise from? Where do they pass away into? That bears investigating. Because we take them very seriously, these thoughts, and they really cause us to suffer. And the more attached we are to the content of the mind, the more we suffer. So that's why cultivating a sense of sort of divine disinterest of the content of the mind is very powerful. But getting back to your question, getting to that sort of 500 level of consciousness means recognizing that you, just as you are right here and right now, are already whole, complete, lovable, and worthy of love. And you are, just by being, perfect. But most importantly, incredibly lovable. So recognizing that you, Jack, or you, the listener, whoever you may be, are incredibly lovable. You are loved. You're safe. And every single cell in your body is lovable, safe. Every single part of your mind is lovable and loved. Operating from this place of wholeness, of recognizing your inherent wholeness, it means that you move away from this paradigm of putting your self-esteem and your value based on external results, where you have this pendulum shift between pride and shame, depending on what happens, happiness and misery. And you learn to just operate from a place of contented, heart-centered, expanded awareness, where you're kind of done with all the thoughts. It's not that they don't arise, it's just that they have very little relevancy to your well-being. Whereas when you really identify with the mind and with the story of Jack or of Leigh or whoever it might be, those thoughts arise and they sort of drag us by the nose. And again, one-way ticket to misery town. That's the destination every time. So when those, let's say this is just kind of awareness, when those thoughts arise, if we just allow them to be, because we know that we are already whole and complete, we can just allow them to kind of come and go. In the same way that the clouds come and go in the sky, there's absolutely no reason for the sky to sort of identify with clouds. But it's when we latch on anxiety. I am anxious. I am happy. I am sad. I'm anxious. I'm full of pride. I'm full of shame. Those things keep changing. Let's stop honoring the changeable. Let's honor the permanent, that which is always there, that sense of I am. And that's how we can start to move up these levels of consciousness, by starting to see through the mind's fabricated narratives, and ultimately through the mind's fabricated sense of self, of being a separate individual entity. I'm curious how that resonates, brother, because that's a bit out there, perhaps.
Not to me. Yeah. Not to me. Maybe to somebody listening, but not to me. I resonate so much, and that states, and I wonder what is really going on here, but that state you described, that sense of wholeness, that sense of like this moment is complete. Those are the exact states I've experienced on psychedelics. And I always come away from those experiences with so much certainty.
Yeah.
And so little anxiety and so much energy. And I'm in so much alignment with who I am meant to become and who I am right now. It's all perfect. Now, what happens is months later, after that experience starts to fade off into the past, you can forget about your intentions during that, right? Like the downloads are so clear. The downloads are like, you're supposed to be a leader. You're supposed to serve people, all these things. And they really energize you, right? Like, I think that's where energy comes from, like living in true alignment with that purpose or that calling or your highest self. And psychedelics seem like a tool to get there. And so that's why I can resonate so deeply with it, because I've experienced it in those moments. And I've taken what I've learned from those moments and attempted to integrate them into my daily life. Now, am I staying in that state of pure love and wholeness 24/7? No. But now that I'm aware that it is real, it's not just woo-woo, it exists. It's like that gives you an ideal to strive for. So I guess I got two questions with that. What do you think is going on with the psychedelics that are making me and everybody else feel this way? And have you had any experiences yourself, and what were they, if so?
Right. Well, I think basically what's going on is that they're just removing certain beliefs, which we take to be real, solid, and complete, and thus they shape our perception of the world and ourselves. They just allow you to see that what feels like a very solid belief is actually mostly empty, and it's not that real. And so this is all just a subtractive process. This is what meditation and mindfulness allow us to do. It's subtractive. We're getting rid of anxieties, beliefs, perspectives, lenses of perception, which very often are based off of childhood trauma. And that doesn't mean that we're broken. It just means that we're human. It means that we've had a human experience, because our parents aren't perfect people. And for that, we can only give them forgiveness and compassion. So they're just allowing us to see through certain belief systems. And you've tasted it. That sense of being inevitable. That's what I meant. That's how I feel. I've never once doubted what I'm doing in terms of business and serving people. It just feels, I know myself, I know my nature, infinitely abundant, connected to all substance. The idea of Leigh is just an idea. And so this is moving away from this intellectualizing, tapping into knowingness, and this more sort of I am presence. Not that that's a final destination. In regards to my psychedelic usage, it's pretty minimal, to be honest. I have taken some, hopefully the feds aren't listening to this, but I've taken some magic mushrooms, and I've taken some Salvia divinorum, which is said to be the sage's herb or something like that. And now that was an interesting one. Mushrooms was pretty cool. There was some I saw these very archetypal images in the ceiling lights, which like cowboys, Native American Indians, astronauts. Kind of weird, very very American actually in a way. But yeah, that was interesting. And I thought perhaps that was kind of Jungian in nature, the shaman, the sort of these different paths. But salvia was interesting because it's a dissociative. So typically, most people report this kind of onset of feeling like they are the chair. For me, I felt like I was roof tiles, and as I was moving my shoulders, it was all the roof tiles were sort of crunching together. And I was like, oh, I'm a roof. This is nice. And then it feels like there's this sort of portal behind you, which is like sucking you into the void. And I always went to the same place, which was my village that I grew up in. I grew up in a very small rural village, population about 150, powerful community, beautiful community. And I went to the spirit world version of that. And I just remember, though, with these sort of towering entities just looking down at me like, we love you. You're loved. You're protected. We are conspiring in your favor. Not conspiring, because that sounds almost devious, but we are, you're whole, you're lovable. You are protected. Go and do what you need to do. We've got your back. And it was just an immensely lovable and powerful experience. It's making me tear up just recounting it. But then there was also this sense of being intimately familiar with the feminine energy behind salvia itself. And there was just this recognition. It's like, old friend. It's been a while, And I'm not sure where that came from. I haven't really investigated it a whole lot. You can't really, you can think your way into a circle regarding these things, or you can just kind of intuitively feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it is what it is ultimately. It's just a phenomena ultimately. But that was very interesting. That's pretty much the extent of my experience. How about you, brother? What have you ingested and sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, I just find it fascinating that everybody has such a unique experience, especially with certain compounds. Like for me with mushrooms, it wasn't as much of a seeing visuals. It's been honestly with everything I've done. So, and it's not like I've taken a million things. I've done a couple mushroom trips. I've done a couple LSD trips, and I've done one ayahuasca trip. And they're all so similar. And maybe this has to do with my personality type. And I've been thinking about this, because the INFJ personality type is introverted, intuition dominant. So you're very in your head, you're thinking all the time, and you just go inward. And I think those psychedelics could help you go even further inward towards your truest nature. And so every experience I've had out of the 5 has just been deeply introspective and just thinking about what path am I on and where am I going? That's been the theme of every single one. And at different times, the path has looked different, but it's always been either I've fallen off the path and I need to get back on it, or I'm on the path and it's just stay on the path and trust that things will unfold in time. Because something that I think a lot of young guys and a lot of young people in general experience is something called that early 20s syndrome, where you see the people ahead of you and they're 30, 35, and they have it all, right? They have all the things you want in the material world, and you want it all now. But being able to step back and say it's unfolding as it's supposed to, right? Your purpose is unfolding as it's supposed to. That's what I've always come back to myself. It's always been introspective. Sure, on mushrooms, the trees start to look a little bit different, or like you see spotty things. But for me, it's always just been my thinking becomes immensely clear, and I feel I'm connected directly to my subconscious and my intuition.
That's very powerful. And, basically you can summarize that experience. We can crystallize it into moving away from this
Yeah.
to this heart-centered intuition, feeling your way through life, trusting your intuition, trusting your natural instincts, operating in line with the Tao, in line with source. That's essentially what you're experiencing. And that the beautiful thing about that is that you can really start to integrate that into your daily experience, into your moment-to-moment experience. And I think this is really the birth of true confidence. And this is the kind of 500 level. It's like, oh, I'm not my story. And I don't need, as soon as you see through that illusion, because it is an illusion, it's just a belief. As soon as you see through that, the mind quietens down so much. And even when there is content in the mind, it just doesn't really matter. So I think that's what you're tapping into, brother. And I think, the obvious next step now is to start investigating. I would say continue cultivating a kind of tranquil, collected mind. And then start investigating this sense of I am Jack, and that belief, and see through it. And be like, oh, it's kind of just an idea. It's just a vibration, ultimately. And just going into that I am Jack to just I am. I don't know what I am, and I don't need to know.
Yeah,
I exist. That's all I can be certain of, and that's really the essence of I amness. It's like I exist, and just being, and it's all the problems fall away. Well, not all of them, but let's say a good chunk of the problems fall away. So that's the obvious next step for you. Tranquil concentration. Get the mind really concentrated in a very relaxed, effortless way. Then start investigating your experience of yourself. And that's, the obvious next step is how I see it.
Damn, I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I'm gonna come over. I need to go re-listen to this and take some notes because I've had a lot of gems come up from you. So I appreciate that. I do have one last question to end off on.
Yeah.
And I'll make it more broad in general. So why should consciousness and meditation be important levers to be pulling or important pursuits to be going down for an entrepreneur or a creator?
Well, I mean, quite simply, these are the highest leverage meta skills that you can possibly cultivate. It's all awareness. If you have more awareness, you can be aware of what's stopping you from moving forward. Once you've identified that and you can learn to relax out of it, you can scale your business. You can become a better leader. You can create an environment more conducive to growth. And also, the more aware you are, the more opportunities you see. When your vision is constricted and you are just tunnel visioning on a single thing, it's very, very stressful. But it really limits what the potential that you can see in both yourself and your business, your environment, your whatever you're doing. So if you want to really pull some levers, cultivate awareness. And if you want to actually scale your business without stress, sleepless nights and rampant anxiety, and getting home and your kids are there, but you can't really be present with them, and then that gnaws away at your well-being because you're not being the father you need to be, but you're trying to balance everything. Well, why don't you just learn to skip to the good part? Because look, when you're 54 years old, you've made it. You've just sold your big company. You've made it. You're comfortable. You're set for life. This is the work that you would be doing anyway, eventually. When all the shiny toys sort of lose their appeal, you'd be like, shit, who am I? How can I access these deeper states of peace? How can I move away from my anxiety and whatever? This is what you'd be doing anyway. So skip to the good part. Recognize that you are inherently whole. Get deeply rooted in the present. Cultivate awareness and bring up your Zen and your business together and learn to scale yourself and your outside world sustainably. And that's kind of how I would frame it. And it's not just theory. This is genuinely true. And you've got the Hormozy types who are, very few people are Hormozy. You've got the naval/naval types who understand and recognize in the Ray Dalios of the world that all problems are essentially problems of consciousness. And by raising your level of consciousness, which means your level of power, which means love in this context, and tapping into this intuition, your innate power, your innate abundance, you can, this is the one of the most powerful ways to scale. Because look, if you've made it, but you're so entrenched in your habitual patterns of perspective, thought, and reaction that you're just a terror to those around you and to yourself, what's the fucking point?
Wow.
So skip to the good part and find your peace while scaling. That's what I would say.
That's phenomenal. I think that's a great place to end it off. I'm personally coming away with so many gems from this. Like, meditation is one of those things it always goes on the back burner, right? But it can't. It has to be. It's the thing that makes everything else flow. So I'm coming away from this conversation with an intention of tomorrow morning, before I go to the coffee shop, 20 minutes sit, maybe 30. Maybe I need to push it to 30. But I really appreciate this conversation. Every time we talk, it's like I feel my consciousness elevating. So I really appreciate it.
Well, likewise, brother, it's beautiful to have this kind of conversation. And thank you for providing the platform for us to have this kind of conversation. And yeah, it's been really a very fruitful conversation. And yeah, I always appreciate connecting with you as well, brother, because for someone so young, you're very wise and you're tapped into this. So yeah, just keep tapping in and keep going deeper and keep investigating and exploring and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Because that's kind of the fun of it as well. It's like, oh, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
Sorry, my wife just came in to get so bro, let's end it here. But that was a fantastic conversation. And yeah, lots of love and metta to you and power to you and your journey. And yeah, I'm sure we'll speak soon.
Likewise. Thank you. And then really quick, last thing is, do you have anything, where can people find you? What can they expect of you? I know you're working on something new. Just plug everything shamelessly.
Well, you can find me at mystical_exo, which is a tag I probably need to change soon. I actually started this Twitter account because my wife was like, can you stop going on about meditation and mindfulness so much and just go and tell people who care? And so I did. I made an anonymous account and it was called Mystical with an AI generated monk picture. And yeah, so that's one place. I offer one-to-one coaching, a 90-day program to help you kind of relax out of your habitual patterns and find a place of sustainable scaling and inner peace, whilst also unlocking all kinds of juiciness of life and kind of getting back in touch with the present moment, which is all you've got, by the way. And it's all you will ever have. Yeah, really teaching people to slow down. And inevitably, we go through some of the wounds of the past that leak out into the present and affect the future as well. Yeah, and I will be cooking some stuff up, but it's too early really to mention that at this point, I would say. So yeah, I just want to say thank you very much, Jack, for the platform, and lots of love to you. And yeah, let's keep connecting.
Thank you for coming on. This was awesome. And I'll link all your stuff below for anybody that's interested. But anyways, this was sweet. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Awesome.